Okay, Phong, flavor versus heat. What you can tell?
So that's one of the most important things. So a lot of people, depending on how they like to smoke, yeah, it's pretty much how much you like to smoke. Some people like to have a high flavor, like smoke, and they don't really care about the smoke itself. Some people want a lot of smoke, don't really care about the flavor as much. Some people like it balanced. And it also depends on what type of coals you like to use. We recommend Japanese coals because it's a lower heat. And there's also it depends on certain flavors. Certain flavors will need less heat. It's because of the flavor components to it, the sweetness of it, how strong it is as a flavor. Certain flavors will need certain lower heat. I've noticed that some flavors has become unpopular because of the trend of smoking coconut coals.
Okay.
Like one of my favorite flavors is white grape.
Okay.
But white grape is a 3 coal flavor. When I say 3 coals, I'm talking about the Tangiers large. With this bowl, so you take 3 Japanese coals and you just put it around right there for white grape. Sometimes, if the weather is not right, I only put 2. But I put it closer toward the center so the heat is more concentrated towards the center. And that's because that flavor is very finicky. If the weather changes too much, if it gets too humid, not humid enough, it will scorch your bowl, and that's because of that flavor. Because of the components in it, it's not as stable, so it needs very, very low heat. And now I noticed that not as many people buy it because a lot of people smoke coconut coals, and coconut coals are so much hotter than Japanese coals.
Yeah.
So it's not as a popular flavor as it used to be. But also, when it comes to packing your bowls, a lot of people will make the mistake of just stirring their tobacco the first time they get it. So this is the difference between what it looks like stirred and not stirred. So this one hasn't been stirred yet, but it has been stirred at one time or another. We just recently stirred this up. And actually, at this point, we really should stir it up again before we use it. So once you stir it up, it looks a lot different from when it's not stirred. And a lot of places will just stir it one time and then say it's good enough. But that's not the case. So when you look at it now, compared to this, it looks completely different. So
here's more drier.
Yes. So it needs to be stirred up every single time. So it has to be stirred up every single time before you use it. Because if you don't, the flavors will always separate. So it will always, certain flavors will like sink down to the bottom, and then it needs to be stirred into the tobacco again. And that's again, with the leaf of the tobacco, the absorption of it, and then that's why when you put it in the bowl, you stir it up, make sure it's stirred up really well, put it into the bowl, so you're making sure you get all that flavoring in there. Or else, because if we were doing a mix, there's certain flavors that you won't get. But so that also leads into, if you don't get a certain flavoring, let's say like if you got Peking Sun and you don't get the citrus notes out of it because the citrus flavors has separated from the tobacco, and you put it in the bowl and you pack it like you normally would. You put the same amount of coals you would normally put on there. It just doesn't taste the same, or the heat is too much. It's because it's missing a component now. So it's completely different. And there's certain flavors, like certain citrus flavors, it's just a very finicky flavor where it doesn't smoke as well with a lot more heat.
But just happen with the citrus because they're more oily, or happen with sweet flavors too. Like I can use some example, easy to say, is chocolate cherry.
Yeah.
You must be careful and to manage the heat control to smoke well.
Yes, it's definitely not just citrus flavors. It's certain flavors are sweeter, so it's a little bit more difficult, but it's not just sweetness. It's also like cherry is very volatile itself. Just from the flavoring that we use for cherry is very volatile. So it's a lot more difficult. Sometimes you have to baby it. And that's why we recommend Japanese coals, because it's smaller, it's a lot less heat, so that you could make tiny little changes. With coconut coals, it's hard to make tiny changes because it's so much heat to it. And that's the difficult thing with our tobacco, is that a little changes a lot. It's a lot bigger than people think it is.
Yes.
Lemon lime comes to mind. That it's not a 3 coal flavor, which is what we call 3 coal flavors if it's in a Tangiers large and we use 3 Japanese coals on it. It's not a 3 coal flavor, but sometimes it only needs 3 coals because of how the weather it is, or how how the environment we're smoking it in. It's a lot less so now because we don't need the acclimation anymore, but there's still certain days where certain flavors need to be smoked differently, like chocolate cherry. Cherry's already a volatile flavor. Chocolate should stable it just a little bit, but it's not that stable because of how sweet it is. There's blueberry. Blueberry is one of the most finicky flavors. Blueberry, if you don't do it right, it could easily burn out your bowl. And we have a list of 3 cold flavors, but blueberry is actually one of the only 2 cold flavors that we have because it needs a very, very, very little heat to work.
Pessoal, vocês viram quanta informação e de quanta coisa, né? É o que eu sempre falo, toda vez que eu venho pra cá, o quanto eu aprendo é muito interessante assim. E é esse tipo de informação que é bacana, o quão isso não é uma ciência exata, sabe? Então o quanto você pode aprender cada vez mais com as coisas. Então assim, foi o que o Phong falou, um detalhe desse tamanho muda uma coisa tipo estratosférica, assim. A gente às vezes não tem essa ideia, né? Que um pequeno detalhinho pode mudar uma coisa assim muito grande. Então assim, é muito bacana ter essa experiência, aprender e conseguir trazer isso cada vez mais para vocês. Então, estamos tentando abordar o máximo de assuntos possíveis, as dúvidas mais frequentes de vocês, para tentar solucionar e para fazer com que você tenha cada vez uma sessão sempre melhor.
Really depends. It depends on, pretty much everything. Coals, how you like to smoke it, bowls. It really depends. It really depends on how you like it. We'll talk about more about that later on. Thanks for watching.
So, Phong, in one side we have coconut coals, another side silver tips or Japanese coals or